As far back as I can remember, I was told how difficult of a child I was, that I used to climb everything, run away, and that I was too much to handle. So my grandmother wouldn't watch me. In my teenage years, I was constantly reminded how my mother couldn't wait until I had a child of my own so I could be paid back for all I had put her through. I also heard it while pregnant and after having my kiddo. I was labeled as bad as, at a young age in school system. I loved to chat, was easily distracted, and according to my kindergarten teacher, I would never be successful. If only she could see me now. I now think back to these messages being conveyed to me at such a young age and how it impacted me deeper than I was ever able to acknowledge. The stories were told over and over again where I was reminded of how difficult I was, how I was a challenge, and that I was bad for how I acted. Don't get me wrong, I did some things that were not so great, but they were normal kid things. Everyone sneaks out the house to meet their bestie when they're 13, right? In my 20s, I began to realize that the relationship that I had with my mother was not normal. As a kid, I thought everyone else had an imbalanced relationship. I couldn't understand why they called their moms so much for advice or support, or why they wanted to hang out with them so often. The realization that I grew up with The realization that what I grew up with was not a typical relationship was crushing to my heart, and I grieved the loss of what I needed. I've always feared becoming like my mother. I actually decided at one point that I didn't want to have kids because I didn't want to raise them the way as I was raised. After a lot of therapy, and I mean a lot, I was able to start to develop a new narrative. I began to not listen to my mother's version of who I was and step into the woman I am today. When I got pregnant with my daughter, I dove headfirst into books about gentle parenting. I never wanted to have my daughter have the relationship that I have with my mom or that my mom has with hers. The more I realized that my mother raised me how she was raised, and my grandmother raised my mom how she was raised, that this was all they ever knew and didn't know any other way. There's a vicious cycle through generations of mothers and daughters in my family having the exact same relationship, and that it needed to stop with me. In order to do this, I needed to break the cycle of generational trauma. My mom's wish came true that I ended up having a kiddo that was similar to me. She is fearless, innovative, creative, funny, and has the biggest imagination. At around 3 years old, I began to notice that Lucy had challenges with aspects of her life that other kiddos her age did not. Some are that she doesn't like loud noises or specific tones. She will tell someone who is singing out of tune to stop singing and shush them. She has an extremely hard time going from one activity to the next and has no concept of safety. She climbs everything. This kid scales the walls and is so strong. After evaluations, it was discovered that she has sensory processing disorder. I again found myself diving into books about this so that I could learn as much as I could to be the best parent for her. I even wrote a resource guide for her before the official IEP was compiled. I will always remember the day that I told my mom about what was going on with Lucy, that she was running away during transitions and when overstimulated, that she was climbing everything and didn't like certain sounds. She looked at me and said, "Oh, that's what you used to do." And it dawned on me that I too have similar challenges as Lucy, that I grew up without support and figured out a way to live. I was labeled as bad, difficult, and challenging by my mother and others, when really, I just needed resources to help me instead of punishments. I have now made it my motherhood mission to provide support, love, and guidance for Lucy to have a different life experience than I did. With raising Lucy, I've been able to do a lot of healing from the pain that I have experienced. Over time, I have stopped listening to my mother's voice in my head about what type of person I am, and I started to listen to myself. I have changed the narrative that I was given when growing up, and my life is forever better for it.